opening segment here. Week 0 was a big fat 0. Football on television for those who really needed it.
I'll give it half. It wasn't a 0. It was a 0.5 because it did satisfy my itch.
There is no such thing as a week half. It just doesn't work that way. Connor O'Gara is with us. He is a national columnist, Saturday Down South. Connor, was week 0 for you a 0, or was it at least a 1?
I'm going to give it at least a 1 because we're in the content business, and I have plenty of talking points from that Illinois-Nebraska game. I mean, just in your neck of the woods alone, I watched Brett Bielema on Saturday, and I had probably 3 or 4 different moments where I thought to myself, that guy just belongs in the Big Ten West. And I wish that I could go back in time and take out the Arkansas chapter and just leave Brett Bielema in the Big Ten West for the last decade and watch what he could have become in college football. Because, you see what he's doing in year 1 in Illinois, and, yeah, it's going to get more difficult, and they're probably going to have some tough times this year. But amidst all the talk about Scott Frost was the fact that all he did was find a way to adjust mid-game after losing his starting quarterback and just act like no big deal. And he's got an extremely experienced squad, but I'm happy for Brett Bielema that he's being able to find this chapter in Champaign, even though he's got some tough times ahead. But I had plenty of stuff to talk about between that and Scott Frost stuff. I mean, goodness, we're off and running here.
I mean, Illinois' punt coverage is so frightening, so frighteningly good. You've got opponent punt returners literally taking a step into the end zone so that they don't have to get hit. So that's how good Brett Bielema is as a coach. And he's getting the same treatment then, or I guess I should say Arkansas is getting the same treatment from the press, when it comes to Bielema, as they did with Chad Morris. We had a listener text in. He went to see Chad Morris's first game in Allen High School, and in the local paper, it referred to him as the former SMU head coach, Clemson and Auburn offensive coordinator. Said nothing about his time at Arkansas. So, gee, I wonder why.
If you don't win a game in the SEC, did it really happen?
I don't think so. I don't think it counts.
Yeah. Well, it was obviously a terrible showing by Nebraska, and there really weren't any other good games over the weekend. But
you didn't enjoy UCLA Hawaii? Come on.
Enjoy? Come on, that's strong. It was a blowout.
It was terrible.
What's your favorite talking point from the Big Ten big opener?
So the Scott Frost thing is fascinating, and I say that as somebody who spent 2.5 years out in central Nebraska. I've talked about that before. I live 20 minutes from where Scott Frost grew up in Wood River, Nebraska, and I know all of the attention surrounding him and all that went into it, and being down here in Orlando during his time when he set the college football world ablaze with UCF in 2017. So I have a little bit of a different sort of connection to Frost, and it's baffling to see these mistakes still happen for this Nebraska team that, quite frankly, shouldn't be in this spot right now. I mean, they're making year 1 mistakes, and so now everybody's wondering, in a game that Scott Frost just couldn't lose on that stage, where that's the only game that we're going to be talking about, only game involving 2 Power 5 teams in week 0, and he goes out and loses it, following this bizarre report about NCAA violations because of off-campus practices, which just looked like a page out of Tennessee's playbook with trying to get out of this potential $20 million buyout. It's bizarre. But there's all these people talking about, could if Scott Frost can't do it, then who can at Nebraska, which I think is ridiculous. And Sam Pittman is kind of an example of look, we think we have these hires figured out, and people like to criticize them nationally, but so much of it depends on what these coaches do after they're hired. Sam Pittman made great hires with his assistants, and he looks like a guy who has his head on right and is not necessarily too stubborn for his own good. Scott Frost is too stubborn for his own good, and he hires coordinators who he's way too indebted to, and he doesn't know how to properly evaluate them. So I think there is a lot to talk about with that, and I gave you more week 0 content than probably you would have had from anyone else who would have come on this show. I'm just saying.
Well, I appreciate it, Connor. And you're exactly right. Just the mental mistakes, it just feels like they just mentally weren't prepared. But like you said, we are moving on to week 1. And with that comes all the predictions and the excitement and everything that comes along with the college football season. I've read your top 10 upsets in the SEC. Personally, loved number 10. Love the Week 3 Mississippi State matchup. But in that article, you also have Arkansas beating Texas and Texas A&M. Do you think that is realistically possible for them to sweep Texas?
Yeah, I mean that's why I got it in there. I'm a believer. I'm a believer in the first part of the schedule, especially. I think this is one of those seasons in which if you have that depth, those 6-year guys, which Arkansas has in spades, it's going to benefit you early on. And I think we're going to see defenses take a step up in general in the SEC this year after they were just horrible last year. And Arkansas was bad down the stretch with the depth issues. But I think those early season matchups against those Texas schools are favorable. And I think they're favorable in part because of some of the inexperience at the quarterback position. Both of those matchups are going to be involving first-time starting quarterbacks. And Haynes King, the A&M starter, is going to have a little bit of that road experience, although technically it's not, road experience that he's going to need against Arkansas, not road experience that he's going to need in Denver for that game against Colorado. But at the same time, I think that what Barry Odom is going to be able to do and why his defense is so unique and why it's able to work is because of how it can fluster a first-time starting quarterback, somebody that maybe doesn't have those reps. So I think that's really where Arkansas is going to thrive, and they're going to be able to win the turnover battle. Texas is due for another non-conference loss. They didn't have the real non-conference slate last year, 2013 and 2019. They've lost a non-conference game every single year. I think it happens this year in year one of the Steve Sarkisian era, and I think it happens to Arkansas.
That's 20% of your top upsets. I love that. So, I mean, you're probably expecting the Razorbacks to finish with a bit of a whimper. Because what did you have them at to finish the season? I forget. But I mean, you wouldn't be the only one because that back half of the season is awfully difficult, especially LSU on the road, followed by Alabama. I think Mizzou's going to be good this year, and they've already had Arkansas's number.
So I have them going 7-5, which 7-5 overall. That would be 3-5 in SEC play, a chance for an 8th win in a bowl game. I mean, think about that. Been 5 years since Arkansas fans got to experience a bowl game, and that was going to happen last year, but then COVID, of course, did its thing. But think about that. Think about where this program would be at and how encouraging that would be when you look back on November of 2019 and all the questions. And look at Nebraska. Look at Nebraska. Look how long this can take sometimes to get back on that level and to feel like you have the right person in place and to feel like you have something that you can actually build on instead of just looking like a program that's without answers and it's just sitting there scratching its head in the first part of the season. Now, there's no guarantee that Arkansas gets there, and I'm maybe a little bit more on the optimistic side than others, but I think you can't underestimate that, especially in this division when it looks like so many of these teams are going to be improving. I just think that would be a major win for this Arkansas program if they were able to get into December with those types of expectations moving forward.
I don't think anybody in our listening audience would be upset with 7-5. I mean, that's a big improvement from 3-7 and the Chad Morris here, and it shows that you're going in the right direction. Week 1 matchups, there's a lot of kind of cupcake matchups around the SEC, but the two biggest ones are both taking place in Atlanta, one Saturday, one Monday, in Bama, Miami, and then Ole Miss versus Loserville. How do you see those two matchups working out for the SEC?
Well, shots fired, by the way, Georgia Clemson. Big time matchup there.
I forgot about that one.
It's going to be, all three of those games are going to be great. And I think that if you're looking at Bama and Miami in the opener, Miami's feeling good, as they should be, an offense that returns all but their tight end, Brevin Jordan, coming into this year with Derek King back healthy, coming off the torn ACL. I don't know that Saban has seen a quarterback as good as Derek King in a season opener, but you'd be foolish to bet against Saban in an opener. I mean, this is a guy who hasn't even played in a game decided by less than 3 scores in a season opener since 2014. All right, don't bet against Alabama in the season opener if we're just talking about straight up. Miami to cover the spread a little bit different. But, I think Alabama still has the advantage there with what it returns defensively, especially in the front seven. And then I look at that Louisville-Ole Miss game, which is just the perfect dessert for opening weekend. You get to Monday night, a Labor Day weekend, and you're like, oh, man, I got to wait a whole week for football. No, wait, I'm good. I get to watch Ole Miss. Ole Miss was my favorite team to watch in all of college football in 2020 because you didn't know what you were going to get on a weekly basis with that offense. And there was always turnovers. There was always high-scoring games, and, well, with the exception of Arkansas and, of course, the one-arm bandit game. Who could forget that? But this is still an Ole Miss team that's going to have so much firepower returning on offense. And watching them against Louisville in that opener, Malik Cunningham, who's one of the better quarterbacks in all of college football, we're going to see how much Ole Miss has really improved defensively. I think there are going to be a ton of points scored in that game, and it should just be a great opening weekend for the SEC. I think that Ole Miss has a good chance to take care of business in that one. And if the SEC is able to sweep those 3 games, if you want to include Georgia and Clemson, we'd be talking about a major statement for the rest of the college football world.
Hey, Connor, what do you think the chances are that more LSU fans than UCLA fans at the Rose Bowl this next weekend? What do you think?
Big chance.
Big chance.
Big chance of that. If you could probably count individually the amount of UCLA fans that were there in attendance. I know people are saying, look, like, you can't criticize fan attendance during a pandemic, all that stuff. And I saw people coming to the defense of UCLA and saying, well, there's a beach a half hour away. Give me a break, man. Like, give me a break. If we're talking about not being there because of the pandemic, all right, I totally get that. But still, I mean, you look anywhere in the country and you will see full stadiums this Saturday. You'll see them across the SEC, and you'll see fans who are passionate and who care and feel like this is something that's been long overdue. And I'm not trying to get into anybody's personal beliefs about the pandemic, but still, at the same time, you saw those images. They were really, really bad.
Ooh, so bad.
LSU is going to have no shortage of fans in attendance. That seems like the lock of the week in college football.
Heck, I remember the Rose Bowl being completely full for a Josh Rosen versus Nick Starkel A&M game. How many years ago was that? Since Starkel's, what is this?
2017.
I think that was 6 years ago, and Rosen is backing up in the NFL now. Hey, Connor, your challenge now, and we'll have to remember this by the end of the season. Great column on the one thing you're excited about for each game in the SEC this weekend. But you're going to have to do that for Week 13, and there just are going to be some teams that there's nothing exciting about by then.
For Cupcake Week, I will find a way to get excited, and we'll get into the weeds big time. I mean, we'll be talking about guys who played in the SEC like 6 years ago, and we'll get into some of those matchups as well. Jake Bentley, I think he's going to be playing against an SEC team in like Week 13. He's still should be a senior in high school, some people are saying, but we'll no shortage of storylines to talk about even during Cupcake Week. I promise you.
Well, and on Monday next week, we can talk more about this Ole Miss Louisville game. Monday night college football next week. We don't get any tonight, unfortunately.
It's going to be awesome. I can't wait for it. I hope you guys are very fired up for college football season because, man, it is so much better to be talking about actual games and whatnot right now compared to what we were talking about this time last year.
Hey, man, nobody has said the letters NIL or the word alliance on this show until
But you just did.
44 minutes into it right now. Hopefully that'll stay the same. Connor, appreciate you, man. We'll talk next week.
Sounds good. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, Connor.
Connor O'Gara on Twitter at CJ O'Gara. Saturday Down South always has something fun to talk about. And now that we have games, a lot easier to talk about fun things. 877-377-6963. Arkansas men's basketball has released the non-conference schedule. It's just coming out, I think, right as the show started. I think they previewed pretty early in the morning with a funny tweet from Muss trying to grab the schedule out of Connor Vanover's hands, which I don't think he can do without a really tall ladder. All right, we'll go through that schedule after the break. And got a caller on hold who I think is pretty fired up as well. It's halftime, and we're right back.